think the last numbers I saw were 78 or 78, 77 or 78%. So, I mean, we're above the average, but I think we still have room to go, and I think Roger and Mark would agree. Okay, so we get to 2022 now. Bear in mind, about March last year, Roger called me and we said, what are we going to do with this drought? How are we going to manage these cows? And my first comment was anything that's over 10, anything with a bad back, bad eye, bad disposition, they're gone. No questions, they're gone. I said my second recommendation is that we're going to find out who wants to be there. We're going to put, we've been breeding for 60 days. We ended up last year breeding for 50. But we put some pressure on because the slide I'm going to show you in a minute, if you've got cows that don't want to work in a system like this, you need to change their address and you need to change their job description. Don't buy them, don't baby them, don't start a tractor and feed them, just change their job description. So anyway, last year we bred for 50 days. Yearling heifers, 34 yearling heifers, 30 pregnant, so we're up 88%. We had a 6 condition score on them. We're 79% first cycle, 8% second cycle, and we didn't have any third cycle pregnancy. Now, on a shorter than 60 day, I know where I think we need to be efficient and keep the cow herd friendly and loaded. But if we're developing those heifers right, we can keep, a vast majority of those cows dead in the first cycle. I think we need to be on like 42 to 50 days. I think we need to be at least 70 and probably 75 here, which we did all right there. Our 2-year-olds, we were 95% pregnant on, which I was thrilled about. And we're getting there. We're finding out what cows want to be in the system. We had 60% of the first cycle. Not bad for where we come from. Would like to see it a little higher. But our condition scores are good. Our 4 through 9s, we're down below 90% here. But as I went back through the data, remember those cows that I told you we added the year before? Those last year were 6-year-old cows, and some of those cows told us they didn't want to work in that system. And that's where a good number of those open cows came from, was from purchased cows. So we identified them. They said they didn't want to live there.
How long will the purchased cows be in the system?
A year. So get them out of there. I want to know who wants to work. But overall,
is that typical that the purchased ones don't always work out and the ones you raise in the system are much better for you?
Those raised in the system are much better. Anytime you transport cows, unless they come from the neighbor or you know him, how he does things, like people that take cows from Florida to Montana or Montana to Florida or, Oklahoma to Nebraska, you always expect some fallout because you really don't know what you've got. You know you've got pregnant cows when you buy them, but you don't know if they've been babied, you don't know what's going on. That doesn't surprise me at all when I purchase cows. But overall last year we were just just under 90. I'll live with that as we work through that system. But we're getting the cow herd more front end loaded. And every calf I can get born in that first cycle, as I move the calf from the second cycle to the first cycle, that's at least 42 pounds of weaning weight that I have in that calf by moving it from second cycle to first cycle. I use a rule of thumb of 2 pounds per day on this. So as I move those calves forward in that cycle, every cycle is roughly 42 pounds. And at today's prices, that's dollars. That's real dollars. Okay, so last year we had 156 females exposed, 140 pregnancies. Didn't lose anything from preg-check calving. We lost 4 calves during calving. Now down here at the bottom, these 2 numbers I've got a question mark behind, and that's because obviously we haven't weaned yet, and we don't know for sure what our numbers are going to be. But if we can hold where we're at today, we'll wean 136 calves, and we'll have an 87% weaned calf crop on cow exposed. So that performance has done this. It's increased. We pushed cows to the first cycle, and we're weaning more calves per cow exposed than when we started out 3 years ago. Okay, so a few of my thoughts, and these are strictly my opinion. I've worked with Roger and Mark. I've worked with the grazing. When I was in Nebraska, I worked with a corn farmer who decided he could make more money with cover crop and raising bulls than he could cash crop corn. So he still plants cash crop corn, but X number of his pivots go into cover crop every year. So, one of the things I've learned from those systems, as well as a seed stock producer I work with in Glen Hills, be prepared to find the cows that want to work for you. You shouldn't have to work with the cows. That's a mentality my dad taught me a long time ago. Was cows are there to make us money, and we shouldn't have to kill ourselves for them to do it. If the cows tell you they don't want to work in your system, they don't like you as an employer, that's fine. Change the job description, change their address. Now, the beauty of that is the way this market is now and where our cow numbers are right now. If we're in a spring calving situation and we have cows come up open, we can bring them back for fall. And the next 2, 3, 4 years is going to be crazy on what people are going to pay for cows. So if we've got an open cow, bring it back for fall, send us out. There's ways to turn those cows into dollars other than just painting the golden arches on them and sending them to slaughter. Okay, as I said earlier this morning, we need to understand the protein and energy requirements on each class of cattle that we're working with and treat them accordingly. Our lean age calves are going to have the highest protein requirement of any of those groups, and they're going to have a pretty good energy requirement. Our 2 and 3-year-old cows are going to be next as far as their protein requirement and energy requirement. Our mature cows, we can maintain those mature cows in the winter on crop roasting. Fields like we were in this morning is like candy with those cows this time of year. And as long as they're grazing that and in good condition, I don't care if they're 6.5% in condition store, but they're grazing it, and we aren't starting a tractor to go bale and starting a tractor to go feed bales and doing things like that. We're letting the cows do the work. The purple battery, I mean, their protein energy requirement is probably similar to a cow's. The thing that I really watch on herd bulls is their vitamin A requirement is very high because of the epithelium in the testicle. Their zinc requirement is very high because of the epithelium in the testicle. We saw an inordinate amount of bad bulls in the western third of the state this spring that I think goes back to vitamin A deficiency. But if we get vitamin A and zinc are responsible for what we call the tight junction between cells in the lung and in the intestinal tract and within the testicles. So if we're even borderline on those, I think it affects how those what their semen production is. Trace mineral and vitamin program to fit the area and the environment. As I mentioned, we've had some copper issues in the higher herd, and we've got that addressed. And the zinc level should be 3 times the copper level in the minerals, just as a rule of thumb. And if it's not there, we start getting into those interactions, and it affects all of our trace mineral metabolism. Most of the state of Kansas, when you get right down to it, is copper deficient. Unless you're on a good year. Most of the state of Kansas is selenium deficient, but there's some pockets where the soil selenium is very, very high, and the forages are toxic with selenium. It starts out south of Shannon Springs, comes over to Russell Springs, comes up through Quinter, ends up in Smith County. Phelps County is the one in this area. I worked with a herd in the Flint Hills where they've got a little pocket of real high selenium. So we need to address those toxicities as we put together a mineral program. We can put together custom blends of whatever we need to do. I do like the chelated minerals, where the trace mineral is attached to an amino acid. I think we get better, so I know we get better absorption that way. And then I use some of the inorganics. Okay, vitamin A, vitamin E. I didn't used to pay a whole lot of attention to vitamin E. This was in the mineral, and we had good green grass, and we were in good shape. But the last few years has made a believer out of me on monitoring vitamin A. It used to be, 30 years ago, you go buy a mineral and everything had 400,000 international units a day in it because they was cheap. And, but over the years, it started coming out, and then in 17, there was a fire at the BASF plant in Germany that made a lot of the worldwide feed grade vitamin A. So vitamin A got very high, and I've seen minerals in the last year that were under 150,000 IU of vitamin A per pound. I'm rather good enough, or in many situations. I helped a young lady at Plainville, young veterinarian, worked up a herd up in Smith County where they had a 5-year history of scallops. 350 cows, red Charolais bulls, and they treat 50% of their calves every year for scallops. Always had at 10 days of age, and they discovered that they've had rotavirus diagnosed, corona, E. coli, crypto, any number of the bugs you want to talk about, they've had diagnosed, and nothing did any good. They discovered that once that calf starts scouring at age 10, if they put 2 quarts of electrolytes in those calves twice a day for 2 days, the calves would go on and do well. So they had a plastic drum in the back of their side-by-side, and when they go check calves during calving, they fill this plastic drum up with water, and they take electrolytes with them, and they just start mixing electrolyte solution. And so, okay, husband and wife, okay? So we're treating 175 calves roughly every year for 2 days, twice a day. I don't know about all of you, but my marriage wouldn't survive that. But there's gift. But we went in there and we did some liver work, we did some blood work. Those cows were void of vitamin A and very, very low in copper. They had been on mineral several years previously that the local veterinarian had put together at a local mill, and he left practice so the mill wouldn't make that mineral formula. So they were just buying the mineral off the shelf. We got a mineral for them, and we addressed the vitamin A. We took the vitamin A to 400,000 IU per pound. I think we took the copper to either 1,800 or 2,000, I don't remember. But then a year ago, and we did this in November, or changed the mineral program October, November, before they started calving last year, which would have been in February. And, you know, I call and ask Lauren and say, you know, what are you hearing from them? Oh, nothing. Well, we finally heard from them when the first calf was 30 days old and we treated one calf with scouts. They thought Dr. Mack and I walked on water. You know, they weren't hauling water, they weren't buying electrolyte. They went through calving, as I recall, that was the only calf they treated for scours, was that one in the first 30 days. They get the weaning last fall, and their calves across the board are 50 pounds heavier than they have been any of the last 5 years. So we corrected vitamin A, we corrected the copper, and their weaning weights were up by 50 pounds. It was actually 50 plus, and I used 50 for an example, and in the market at that time, they had an additional $32,000 worth of income from their calves from correcting the vitamin A and copper. Now, they spend a little more on mineral, but I think we would still have, when we take the mineral out, I think we still have like a $24,000 or $25,000 positive cash flow impact on that herd. So A is important. Okay. Other things from my school of thought. Match the genetics to what you're trying to do. Okay. There'll be some great big cows will work. Okay. Not a lot of them, but you need to find a seed stock producer that, you know, is using a lot of forage grazing, and kind of has a like mentality. Those bulls that you buy also need sire calves that will work in the feed yard. Because, I mean, at some point we've got to sell these calves, right? And in today's society, a lot of them are going to go to the feed yard. I'll tell you right now, my favorite seed stock producer in the state of Kansas, cattle like this. My fresh red Angus, Strong City. When they buy farm ground anymore, they're planting fescue, they're fall cows. Their fall cows, calf on fescue, graze on fescue until they can go to native pasture in the spring. The cows are breeding at 95% plus, or 90% plus, close to 95. They're maintaining condition score on fescue. The calves go to native and then are weaned about the time they're 11 months old, and they do a little more grazing, and when they're just past a year old, they're going in, they're a little bit off, and they get a little grain, but that's how they handle their fall calves. The spring calves are feeding a little bit more grain too, but they're going to start holding the spring calves over, and they're going to have a spring and fall sale so they can utilize more forage with those. Their cattle also performing pretty good. They had a set of open heifers a year ago that they took out in Montezuma, getting the 4.5, converted it 5.5, and cost of getting on those, I believe, was $1.27, and everything else in the yard was averaging $1.23 or $1.44. So the cattle work all do my ad, but good cattle and will work in systems like this. And I wasn't paid to say that. Just sound animal husbandry practices, good nutrition program, simple sound vaccination programs, handle them right, don't do wrong as you gather or move, and the cattle will work for you. Getting back to my systems mentality, look at the entire system, not just one little piece of pie. And you can take that a step further, and you can start looking at how the cattle impact the soil and how that fits into the whole food supply system. And that's when it starts getting really, really cool. Avoid the unintended consequences. Think through things before you do something. In systems vernacular, when we just jump in and do something, that's called quick fixes that fail. That's the Band-Aids we throw on something and then we discover it doesn't work. So dig to the bottom of the iceberg, figure out what's going on before you jump in. Ask lots and lots of questions, whether it's on the soil side, the animal side, whatever, ask lots of questions. Those of you that have heard me talk before have seen this slide, which you've seen several others. How many of you see the arrow in the FedEx sign? Okay. So right here, how many of you see the measuring spoon in the FedEx sign? Okay. Again, a few of you. Right here. So, and the reason I throw that out is, pay attention to details. What are we missing? We need to be able to see the arrow and the measuring spoon as you look at these production systems. My dad was in the banking business after he gave up ranch management in Clark County. Was in the banking business, and one of his favorite quotes as he worked with cattle producers was from a gentleman in Iowa. His name was Bob DeBacco. Bob's comment was the top third of your cows produce 2/3 of your income. And it's very, very true. So again, if we keep that cow herd front end loaded and pick up that extra 42 pounds per cycle, it's more dollars in our pocket. And it's all about turning grass into steak. God put these cattle here to convert cellulose to high quality red meat protein, and so we have good food. Questions? Now don't be shy. I know I didn't answer all the questions. Yes, sir.
When you talk about overnutrition and early gestation, what is causing overnutrition?
A lot of it is corn silage or carbohydrate. Lots of people in Nebraska, not just Nebraska, that's what they want Nebraska, but where we feed corn silage and we start the tractor every day and all the things. No,
Oh, this is fall.
well, no, this would be spring gathers, but if you have those cows in 7 conditions or 7.5 going into breeding season, you know, and then you're AI into a good carcass bull, you know, and you're shooting for 90% prime, and you've got to keep that, they aren't going to have the muscle cells or the fat cells, and so then your system backfires.
So I've read where, like, you mentioned like amino acid flavors. So I've read where some people don't like it because they feel that that's released too fast. Explain how you said that you've seen
The chelated trace minerals, and Wayne, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The chelated trace minerals being attached to the amino acid. The reason they're attached to the amino acid is so that they bypass interference in the rumen with the molybdenum, the sulfur, the iron, things like this that mess up our mineral absorption. The chelated minerals will bypass the rumen, they'll bypass the abomasum, and they're actually absorbed in the small intestine, and they're absorbed at an amino acid absorption site. So the body absorbs those, and the body doesn't realize it's picking up trace minerals. It's just thinking, hey, I got another amino acid, I can have a little bit of protein on it. Now, the inorganic minerals like copper sulfate, zinc sulfate, etc. I mean, they're prone to interference in the root. You know, again, the sulfur, iron, molybdenum, whatever. You know, so but I use a balance of the chelated and the inorganic. I actually like about 2/3 chelated and 1/3 inorganic. Now, we've got a class of minerals out there called the hydroxins, and my understanding on the hydroxins is that they're protected in the rumen, but they aren't protected in the abomasum. So they don't go clear through the abomasum before they're absorbed. So I found that 2/3 chelated, 1/3 inorganic works well for me. I can't say that it's absorbed too quickly. It's absorbed better. I get better absorption efficiency. You know, if I wasn't using the chelates, I'd probably have to have those minerals, like the mineral I worked with Susan's on. We had 1,800 copper, 5,400 zinc, and 2/3 was from the chelate. Now, if I was using straight inorganic, I'd probably have to be up around 2,500 copper and up 72 to 7,500 zinc in order to do the same thing. Does that make sense? You've got a question in what?
Yeah, no, I'm just curious, like the natural, like the cow naturally, like she is getting grass, copper, zinc, whatever.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that, I mean, that doesn't,
Most,
that's the root and everything, so it has to be,
yeah, it's prone to interference in the root.
so why, I guess that's, yeah. That's what it naturally occurs.
Yeah, well, but it's the interference that gets you, and then think about what we've done to cattle in the last 40 years. I mean, we've gone from a F-160 or 150 with a 6-cylinder 4-speed in it to a jet engine that you need jet fuel to run the darn thing. And we wonder why we have heart issues in these cattle and some other things. But because we're expecting more out of cattle than we did when I was a kid, back when dinosaurs still moved.
So is that verified by those biopsy and increased uptake?
Other questions? I'll be around all afternoon, so if you think of something, grab me. So, Roger?
Let's give him a round of applause.